My name is Medi Sengooba, and I work with the Disability Rights Fund as a program officer for Africa, and I'm mainly responsible for Ghana and Uganda.
You are going to brief us on CRPD, or what is it?
The CRPD in full is the United Nations Convention on the Rights of People with Disabilities, which is an international treaty, an international convention that countries have signed to as a commitment that they are going to implement or to ensure that they promote, fulfill, and protect rights of people with disabilities. So it's a bit new, it's about 8 years old, but has been signed to by over 150 countries so far, which is really, really interesting.
So, how is that treaty being applied, being put into practice in these countries, especially in Africa and in Rwanda and East African countries?
Of course, the beauty about it is that so many countries in Africa have so far not only signed, but also ratified the treaty. And what this means is that they have pledged that they are going to not only stop violating rights of people with disabilities, but also to take steps to ensure that people with disabilities enjoy those rights. So I can say, for example, a number of countries are trying to work around changing the laws on disabilities or creating new laws around disabilities. Rwanda is one of those countries that is starting on that process. But also a number of countries are currently, for example, integrating disability issues in the national development programs, the growth strategies, different visions which are guiding growth and development. And so that is a great achievement. And you can see that there is a bit of transition now in many countries from segregating people with disabilities, putting them in let's say, orphanages, in institutions, to working towards opening up the space to ensure that they participate in the day-to-day lives in society on an equal basis with people, like with everyone else. So what I've seen, for example, is starting within the education system, where you're seeing more people with disabilities going to school, but also acquiring higher education qualifications in universities. I have so many friends here in Rwanda who have graduated from universities with visual impairments, with hearing impairments, physical disabilities, among others. So the purpose of this treaty is to kind of act as, we call it a paradigm shift. It's introducing a shift from looking at people with disabilities as a problem, as a charity, as a source of charity, as a group that does not have rights, or as a group that cannot exercise their rights. But it's introducing a model where people with disabilities can live in communities independently and free and enjoy rights like any other person in Rwanda.
So you are having different conferences like the one you have today in Kigali. And I don't know, are you able to enforce governments for applying some laws from the treaty that are not being applied in these countries? Are you ready to do that?
Of course, the thing is, these treaties are signed by the governments. So by the fact that the Rwanda government, for example, went and signed this treaty, it means, one, they recognize that there were so many challenges that people with disabilities in this country were facing. But also they recognize that this treaty can act as a very good guiding framework on how best the government here can work around changing the environment, changing the life not only of a person with a disability, but also the families of people with disabilities and other people who offer support to people with disabilities. So I must say that it may not be the concept of forcing the government, because it's them who have even signed it, but it's working hand in hand with government to ensure that a number of the changes that the treaty is introducing are addressed. For example, our funding mainly goes to organizations, groups of people with disabilities. And if, for example, we funded a group to work around leading a new policy around education for children with disabilities, they are not going to force government to adopt the policy, but they are working with government because they are they are experts in the field of the education of children with disabilities, and then they are supporting government in the process of creating a policy that can favor everyone. So I must say it is not like the forcing game or the game to compel the state to act, but it's a game around, or it's an effort towards all actors, not only government, but also development agencies, UN agencies working in Rwanda, country missions, for example, US mission is UK working in this country to ensure that everyone is programs, everyone is development strategy does not leave out people with disabilities.
I think this is not the first conference because it has been in some other countries maybe. Have been there any change? If it happened, you can tell us.
Yes, there have been changes in the countries, at least where we work. I can say, for example, in Uganda right now, by the time the convention was signed in 2008 in Uganda, there was a new law on disability, which had been passed in 2006. And the same was in Ghana. Then there was a new law still passed in 2006. But what happened is that governments realized that the laws they had passed did not protect people with disabilities to the extent the convention is requiring. So right now there is a bill before Parliament in Uganda to reform the 2006 law, which would really be difficult because it's just 10 years down the road, but because they recognize their gaps, there is a bill before Parliament which might pass very, very soon. So that shows commitment, even when they had done a lot of work in 2006. And for example, in Ghana, we've been supporting a group that has been leading a policy called the Inclusive Education Policy. And this is a policy where so many stakeholders, including UNICEF, have directly been involved. And what is happening now, what has happened so far now, that policy has been adopted by the government of Ghana, and then they've developed an implementation framework and then allocated budgets to guide the implementation of that policy. So those are just a few examples. I must say, like, there are a number of changes. But maybe, for example, currently we are supporting a project here in Rwanda around the alternative report. Rwanda has already submitted a report to the CRPD committee, which is a wonderful commitment because they do not only sign the treaty, they are saying, you know what, we are even ready to share what we've been able to do. The treaty requires that organizations, civil society organizations, also submit what we call an alternative report. So there are groups in Rwanda also working towards that. We've seen steps taken in so many countries where we work. Uganda, for example, next month they are completing Uganda's review and they're going to send recommendations to Uganda on areas that need to change. And this is coming from the UN. So you will see that probably the same will happen for Rwanda and it will become a guiding framework for the state, for the private actors, for the media, for example, on how best to address disability issues. Thank you.
Can I get your B card so that maybe I will